From Squallywood, it's the Dan and Ron Show.
R, it's gotta be rotation. I'm Dan.
And I am Ron.
We are the Dan and Ron Show.
Yep, rotation. A simple concept, but to really appreciate it, Dan and I have broken it down into 5 levels of understanding.
And where do we start?
Level 1.
You got it. Keep your upper body facing down the hill.
Good advice. It paints a simple, goal-oriented picture, but let's not allow the teaching methodology to define the technique.
The simple cue of keeping the upper body facing down the hill is a good start. It's especially appealing in short radius turns since the lower body seems to do all of the turning. While it implies independence, it hasn't passed high school physics yet. So let's move on to level 2.
In the second level of understanding, high school physics comes back to life as we realize that you can't just rotate, and merely saying the word independence is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for omitting Newton's third law.
Remember me on the bar stool? Counter rotation like the upper body and lower body moving in opposite directions. Yeah, the upper body rotating one way and the lower body rotating the other, like this. I'm on a bar stool. And the professor?
You know Newton. Not these one. Newton's third law. Not these kind. A law like gravity. Newton's third law. The action-reaction one. You can't just turn the skis. That is the reaction. Where's the action that made that reaction? What made them turn? 2 things. Rotary push-off and counter rotation. What are these? A skier either pushes off the snow to make a rotation. That is called rotary push-off. Or they turn the upper body the opposite direction. Counter rotation. Action, reaction. It's the law. We assume that action-reaction has to happen at the same time for the skier to be in horizontal balance. Although, have you ever noticed we say action-reaction? If they're so equal, why do they have different names?
They have different names because one happens before the other. The upper body has to stabilize before the lower body can rotate against it. But what makes the upper body stabilize? Muscles. These muscles need to be innervated first. This stimulus comes from the electrical activity of the nervous system. This muscle tension in the upper body creates the stability so the lower body can rotate against it. Action is created first. This is from the innervation of the upper body muscles. Then the reaction of the legs rotating can happen. Action, then reaction.
So, something has to happen before the skis can actually rotate.
So stabilizing the upper body first is the key to rotation, or should I say counter-rotation.
This is an important point. Often we hear the teaching cues of keep the upper body quiet or the upper body is just along for the ride. These are just not correct. Remember, we don't want methodology to dictate technique.
So far, we have faced down the hill, we utilized the upper body to create the action for the reaction of our skis rotating, and now we have created an order to the way we innervate or stabilize the upper body before we rotate our skis.
Pretty good so far. 3 out of 5 levels. let's go back to the nut and the bolt. And the nut, not you, Ron, is turning on the bolt. We know that the nut can turn on the bolt, or the bolt can turn in the nut. But what if there are two nuts?
Two nuts? Oh, like you and me. Okay, two nuts on two bolts, like two legs rotating in the pelvis. This does change the torque situation. We'll call that level 4. Here is the pelvis viewed from the top as if you were looking down at your feet. We're now going to perform a pivot slip from a straight run. Notice the upper body is innervated first, then the feet turn. The rotational torque from the pelvis is equal and timed with the rotational torque of the rotating feet. Turning the feet or legs at the same time reduces the torque demands on the pelvis. Two-axis rotation makes it much easier to maintain a stable upper body. Rotary push-off is a good example of how the torque demand changes when the initiation is with sequential leg rotation. Rotary push-off is a turn initiation. The impetus for the rotation comes from the snow. In this case, the right foot pushing against the snow. This push-off creates a clockwise rotation, which is then transferred up the kinematic chain to the pelvis, resulting in rotation the same direction. The consequence of this rotation, the pelvis continues rotating with the feet, which are now released from the snow, following in the same direction. As the turn is concluding, the pelvis is countered against the lower body. This last move is split rotation.
We have always known that counter is good, but this also helps to explain why turning or rotating both legs simultaneously may be advantageous.
You can't counter that argument.
Let's combine level 3 and level 4 to make level 7, or level 5. The internal-external rotation of both legs, which is most stable when performed simultaneously, as we just saw, needs to have upper body stabilization prior to this dual leg steering, and therefore simultaneous leg rotation is a more advanced technique option.
Good job, Dan. Let's review.
First, let's remind everybody that we have been talking about technique understanding, and the way that we talk to our students and athletes is much more simple. So, level 1, face down the hill.
Level 2. The action of rotating the legs left has an opposite reaction of rotating the upper body right.
Level 3, the upper body needs to be stabilized prior to leg rotation. Independence does not and should not imply that the upper body is not involved. The upper body muscles are innervated prior to the lower body rotation.
Level 4. Medial and lateral leg rotation is countered with lateral and medial pelvis rotation. This could explain why simultaneous leg rotation may be fast, efficient, and advantageous.
And level 5, stabilizing the upper body prior to the dual leg rotation. You have to activate that strong core prior to turning the legs. This may work with sequential leg rotation, but not with simultaneous leg rotation. I'm Dan.
And I'm Ron. We are the Dan and Ron Show. Really, Dan? Two nuts?